name is Sheridan Ruth, and I am here to welcome you home. This is the Exposed podcast. Where we reveal the body-based ways to ease anxiety, heal trauma, and create an empowered connection with love and money using nervous system regulation and a healthy dose of self-compassion.
Chronic pain. It is hard, it is confusing, it can be really difficult, and it can sometimes leave you feeling really invisible when people don't take you seriously. Today I'm talking with Viktoria Hamma. She is a chronic pain and wellness coach with education in hypnotherapy, massage therapy, and personal training. She does have her own practice, both in person in Ontario, Canada, and virtually. She works educating clients and people alike in private addiction treatment center in Ontario, various Indigenous reserves in Canada, and does contract work with many other organizations, including businesses and private schools. She helps to educate clients on the biopsychosocial aspects of chronic pain and unlock their ability to reduce their pain and help with weight loss and wellness goals. She's been featured on many different podcasts and new articles speaking to her experience helping clients with mindset, chronic pain, and wellness. She's a lifelong learner and finds joy in continuing to sharpen and add to her skills. Absolutely amazing. This conversation with Viktoria was really wonderful, and I really recommend it for you if you are if you resonate with the idea of chronic pain at all. We talk about biology, psychology, sociology, pain, tattoos, birth, consent, pleasure, and so much more. So go ahead and dive in. But before you do, if you are currently working to expand and bounce back through the stresses of life from your partner saying that they're going to do something and they're not doing it, or trauma, grief, hair loss, OCD, anxiety, or business entrepreneurship, you want to bounce back from these with more ease and overflow, I'd like to invite you to come on and book an expansion call with me. This is a free 30-minute call where you will receive free coaching and support around your unique situation. We're going to figure out exactly what you need to focus your time, your energy, and your money according to your budget. And if that feels like the best place for you is working through my EASE framework, we will discuss working together. You can book your expansion call with the link down below in the show notes, or going to www.sheridanruth.com/expansion. Go ahead and book that now as we get settled in to this beautiful, beautiful episode. Hey, Viktoria, so excited to have you here on Exposed. And I'm curious and excited to talk with you today about pain. The body, the mind, the subconscious, what's really going on. We have so much pain, and pain that is consistent and chronic. Before we get into that, can you give me and our beautiful listeners like a little bit of a background? How did you end up in this field? Yeah, how did you end up here?
I think almost everybody has experienced chronic pain somewhere in their life. I definitely did from a young age. I used to get migraines and headaches. I played sports, so I had sports injuries, but it wasn't really until I got older and I had an injury that wasn't so easy to figure out. And it left me really struggling in a lot of areas of my life. Like, it didn't just affect my mobility. Something was going on with my foot. It was inflamed. It was swollen. It hurt to move. Like, there was so many things happening. And I went to other people to get help, and I never really got great help. Everybody either shrugged it off, thought I was exaggerating. There's just so many layers of reasons why I was like, why is nobody helping me with chronic pain? And when I went into school for massage therapy and we started learning about pain, it still was very two-dimensional and very physical symptom, focused. And I realized, okay, well, yeah, that's obviously a part of it, but clearly that's not the whole story. Otherwise, all these other physical therapists would have cured me, and they didn't.
Yeah.
So what else was happening? And so as I got into hypnotherapy and all of this other kind of mindset piece, I realized, oh, like pain is really, there's a lot of facets to pain. So there's the biological piece, there's a psychological piece, there's a social piece, there's our beliefs and values and everything else that goes into experiencing pain. And it's not until you actually address all of this stuff that you're actually at risk. And I just saw so many people in need of help that felt really helpless and hopeless. And that was really what drove me to focus on them.
Yeah. Okay. That was a lot. I'm sure for you that wasn't a lot, but for me that was like, I was like, okay. What is chronic pain? How do you define that? Like, how do we know what we're talking about?
So there's some textbook definitions. Textbook definitions would say a pain that lasts for 6 months or longer. I mean, that isn't really a great definition. I would say oftentimes chronic pain, as I described it, is more a pain that you don't necessarily know the origin of. It comes and it goes. You have flare-ups. Sometimes it's okay. Sometimes it's not. It's always kind of in the back of your mind. And oftentimes it doesn't respond well to really traditional medical attempts.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. I like that definition. And I really want to sympathize like with you, that past version of with you, and also our listeners, that feeling of going to the doctor and they're not, I don't want to say that they're not taking it seriously, but they're not seeing you and they're not able to support you. And you kind of walk away like disheartened. And what's that feeling? How would you describe that feeling?
It's feeling invisible.
Yeah.
That's really what it is, because a lot of chronic pain isn't super visible. It's not like a huge cut on your leg that they can sew up and visibly see and people can see it. And so people understand why you're suffering. It's oftentimes so invisible. And so to describe it to somebody, it's a personal experience. Everybody's pain experience is so vastly different. The struggle with the medical community is that they're not actually well educated on chronic pain. They're educated a little bit on acute pain. And actually in North America, at least, our entire system is really designed for acute pain. So if you break your leg, they have a ton of interventions that will help you with a broken leg. If you, have chronic knee pain, there's a million other people in the medical system who think they kind of know how they might be able to help, possibly, if you, maybe. And it's such a winding journey of trying to figure out who you're supposed to talk to, who you're supposed to see. Everybody's got a person who's apparently the person who's going to fix you. Yeah. And really, in the medical community, like if they don't do extracurricular courses, they often are only taught, the average in North America for doctors in school for chronic pain education is about 6 to 15 hours. And
really? Okay. Didn't know that. Very interesting. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you said, where you're like, there's different layers to why we have chronic pain?
Yes. So this is a really tough subject for people to hear when they're actively in chronic pain, because they don't want to hear that it's multifaceted, because multifaceted also means it's more work. And they're already exhausted. Having chronic pain itself is exhausting. That being said, how I explain it is typically even as a massage therapist, we have what's called a biopsychosocial model, meaning that we recognize that all of our experiences have this biological base, they have this psychological base, and they have this social base. And all three of these things come into what is our experience. So obviously, when you're in a traditional medical setting, they focus really on the biological piece. This is why I find a lot of people, they get so heavy into focusing on that biological piece and they don't get the results, but everybody keeps telling them, well, you have tight fascia, you have, a poor posture, and they try and give them these biological reasons to their pain, and they try these interventions, they don't work. Well, it's because you're using one out of the 3 bubbles. And all these 3 bubbles intersect to create pain. Pain is actually a process that happens in our brain in response to stimulus. So we get stimulus from what's called our nociceptive nerves. So we have specific neurons that get information. They send this information up to the spinal cord or the brain, and then the brain decides what to do with it based off of past experiences, environment, other things happening in the body. There's so many reasons it will give a response. One of the things is the psychological, meaning if you have had this pain before, and let's say it was a sprained ankle, and the body has determined that if we have a stimulus that's similar, our ankle could be weak and in danger, we're going to create pain even before we injure it further. So before we actually have something that should create pain, it will create pain to protect us. And this actually happens in our amygdala. When it comes to parts of the brain, our amygdala is that old reptilian survival piece of us. And it does a really good job at keeping us alive for the most part. But it struggles because when it comes to pain signals, it anticipates pain and creates pain. So it is ready and primed to create the signal and experience of pain even before we've had a painful experience. It is literally trying to protect us from doing something worse or damaging, regardless of whether that's the actual true outcome that could happen. It is also the first to activate in pain signals, meaning that your smarter part of your brain, your anterior cortex, which is the one that's a little bit more rational, more, it's less emotional, I will say at least. It's very logical. It activates later. The amygdala activates first. So it doesn't get a chance to actually send this information to the anterior cortex before sending out a response. And this is why chronic pain becomes that loop, because we have the amygdala always responding.
Yeah, I even, I do a lot of work around relationships and relationship with yourself and relationship with your finances. And even as you're thinking, what my brain is doing is it's like thinking about all of the times, and, I do this too. I've done this for so long, where we think, okay, I feel like a little bit afraid right now. And I don't want to feel afraid because fear is painful. So I'm going to control or nitpick or criticize or like plan something to make sure that I don't feel the pain of feeling fear. But then because of everything that I do, I'm actually going to create the exact scenario that I was really trying very, very hard to avoid. And it's kind of similar, but a little bit on the inside and a little bit more on the outside, would you say?
Yeah, and what's interesting is there's a quote, I can't think of who it is now, but essentially they talk about the fact that most pain interventions are trying to steal the spotlight from pain. Because if you can distract the pain signals, you can actually stop them from getting through. So you can actually reduce pain just by distracting the brain and the body. So there's a lot that we think, it has to be. So I use kinesiology tape as a good example. It does a lot of things. It helps with circulation. It helps with the feeling of posture. It helps with muscle activation. But one of the things it also does is it just distracts the body, and it creates a different type of communication, which can just in that alone help with pain. So I use it on a lot of people when they have more acute pain, or when we're further along into the intervention, where I can explain how to use it for their chronic pain, where they're not going to feel like it's the be all end all.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes so much sense. So if that would be something that you're kind of doing that's leaning towards the circle of biology, right?
Yes. But it intersects a lot with psychology because it acts on the nervous system.
Yeah. And it's pulling on the brain. Okay. So can we focus a little bit on what are ways that you can understand or influence the bubbles of psychology and sociology to support yourself with chronic pain?
Yeah. So the first thing when I do an intake with somebody, I obviously get them to tell me their story, and I make a lot of notes. And what's very interesting is there's a lot of words we use to describe our pain that are going to really activate the amygdala, like broken, damaged, a mess. We've all said these words. Oftentimes with low back pain patients, they'll say, oh, my back is just a disaster. It's a mess. and they start to create a very vivid image with their words of what their pain feels like physically. The problem is our brain doesn't really understand how to differentiate between reality and vivid descriptions often. So the vivid descriptions we give our body is going to reinforce that biological process, even though it's really a psychological, social piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. Yeah. Even this morning, I was thinking, I was actually listening to a podcast, I think, and it was talking about the word broken and healing and fixing. And I use the word healing, but I kind of try not to. I don't really know what other word to use that people will understand, and that isn't just something that I've kind of sat in my bedroom and come to. But broken, which, like, if you look at that in the dictionary, it means that it's fallen apart. It's no longer, there is no longer a use of it. And so I think when I hear even like the words like, oh, like I broke my back, or I broke my something, or like it just feels like it's broken, or it's damaged or something. It's like saying that we need to fix it. It's like saying that we need to replace it, which is so different. It's kind of violent. It's so different to saying like, yeah, it's going through like a healing process at the moment. Or I don't know, what are other ways that we speak about pain that are empowering?
I call them low risk, high reward treatments for my clients. I often just say, just indulge me, and I ask them to use words like, my body is competent. My body knows how to protect me. Like, don't even get into the really nitty gritty of it. Just say, my back is, I'm working on, helping my back. I'm working on this, like, you don't need to get really specific, because at the end of the day, pain is pain is pain is pain to some extent. So even though I get people to do a really thorough health history at the beginning, after that, it's really just, okay, well, what are the words they often use? And the words will often give a good indication of what their triggers are to trigger a pain response or trigger a flare up, because they start to create a very vivid picture to themselves as to when their body needs to respond in a little bit more of a dramatic way and protect, and in your body's mind, protect you.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about protecting? Because I think what most people's mind is probably going to is like, oh, it's protecting me from like falling down or something like that. But I think you and I both know that it's more complicated than that. How can you explain that a little bit?
So protecting is a very big term, and it can mean a lot to everybody differently. So what's interesting is that I will use herniated discs as a great example. When people get a herniated disc in their back, and the majority of us did not go to medical school, so we don't really understand what that means. We don't even, we've done a little bit of internet research, we've seen pictures. So we feel like our back is now not strong. So our body, you've said to your body, my back is not strong. Our body goes, oh, our back's not strong? Well, that's really not good, because our back supports a lot of things. It helps support our rib cage, helps support our internal organs. We need to create pain because we need to protect all of these organs. It's a really survival thing, that pain is. A pain grows out of a really good place. People who are born without pain actually often die very young, because they will break a leg and have internal bleeding and have no idea, because they have no pain to tell them they need to move away from something. They can put their hand on a stove and get third-degree burns and get infections, and they never know, because they can't feel pain. It's actually not a good thing to not feel pain. Pain is there to help us move away from physically, mentally, emotionally, from something that is perceived as danger, perceived as a threat. Whether or not these are threats is where chronic pain comes in. So we have beliefs and ideas about what's dangerous or safe for us based off of past experiences. So for instance, if you're driving in a car and you get in a car accident and hurt yourself, there is a very easy narrative that can be created by your body that says driving is painful, driving is dangerous, driving is not safe. Is that reality? No. Many of us drive and we feel no pain and we are safe. But because of the experience and whatever happened, it can create a story that explains that narrative well to the body to be able to prime it to protect us from a perceived danger. So pain is a protector, and it protects us from emotional pain as well. So what's interesting is because pain is actually created in the brain, there is times where you can think of something hurting you and it can create a pain response. And they've done studies actually. And this is where visualization, just as much as it can hurt you, it can help you. So as they've done visualization studies where thinking about pain can create a physiological response in your body, thinking about reducing pain creates a physiological response in your body.
Yeah, that's really amazing. The place where my mind goes when I'm listening to you say that is I think of like my period pain, like cramps. And I think of that protection. And I believe that when you're on your period, it's a time for your body to be kind of like doing less, right? Like slowing down, taking some time. And I've noticed that, well, my perception of my pain when I have period pain is like, if I begin to feel that little like tingling sensation of like, okay, guys, something is happening, it's literally my body just saying, please clear your schedule. Like what you have planned, yeah, we're no longer going to do that. That's not the best idea. Just go lay down, please. And if I listen to that, the pain, it goes away. And if I don't, it gets really bad. Is that an example, or is that just me making it about myself?
So it's the same but different.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right in the sense that you so metabolically during your period, you are using up more energy, which is why your body is telling you to rest. So it's actually not a bad thing that you're resting. However, if you switch that into the example of a low back pain patient, when they have low back pain, they then say, I can't pick up this laundry because it's going to damage my back.
Yeah.
So the perceived idea of damage is really where you're intensifying that experience of pain, because now you're telling your body you can't do something, or if you do it, you're going to get pain. So it's interesting because the intention of where your thought is will give the outcome. So if you're thinking about your period as, where you just need to rest, that's okay. But if you're thinking of your period as, I'm shedding from the inside and it's terrible and all these muscles are doing this and it's dangerous for me, and maybe you've had it in cysts in the past, or maybe you've had other gynecological issues that trigger those memories, that will give you it's a bad feedback loop, because you're not actually experiencing things in a pure state. You're experiencing it as you did previously, which may not be this time's experience. And a great example is, if you cut yourself with a paper cut, it really, really hurts. It's one of the worst things ever. Is it though? Is it? Like, you've had other pain where you bumped your leg and you have this massive bruise 3 days later and you're like, oh, I forgot I did that.
Yeah.
So why is it?
Yeah.
Right?
Does that come into like the sociological part of things and kind of the stories that we tell ourselves about what should hurt, how much it should hurt, what we've seen other people say about themselves? Something that I've noticed, I've traveled quite a bit, and I've kind of noticed, and there's some really wonderful studies on this as well, that different cultures tend to have different types of pain. And I always am really curious. I'm like, is that, like, it seems a bit odd that genetically I can believe it, but it does seem a little bit odd that geographically it's going to be like, oh, everyone gets migraines, or everyone gets low back pain, or fibromyalgia, or chronic period pain, or something like that. Can you talk about that? Can you tell us?
Yeah. So this is really interesting because you're 100% right. There's some interesting talk about even giving birth in other countries and the experience compared to in North America. And I mean, there was one gentleman who was talking about how he literally was in like the Congo and watched a woman just give birth right there on the street, and like pick up her baby and move on with her life. And he was like, what? Like, what is happening? Like, this is no birth story I've ever seen ever, right? Whereas we're going through the excruciating labor and everything else. So what's interesting about something like that is that when you have stress or an idea of what something's going to happen, what it's going to look like, you actually prime physiologically your body to do it. So in Europe, there's areas where they don't have like whiplash injuries like we do in North America. It just doesn't exist. Like the long-term effects of whiplash don't exist. And part of that is, I think, because of the story that is perpetuated in North America about whiplash. You know, you get in a car accident, your head's shaking from front to back, and they have the visuals of your brain going back and forth. And then they talk about all these long-term effects that you can have. And the more they talk about that, the more they prime you to actually psychosomatically create those experiences out of fear of damage to your brain. So because again,
because you go into
whiplash,
the protect, and like your body creates that protect, tense, shoulders up, like covering, if you guys couldn't see me, like shoulders up, like what, maybe you know this, I learned this when I was studying, but what is the name of the protect body shape where your shoulders go up and you come forward and you protect your heart and everything clenches? There's a wonderful, you know what I'm talking about. They did the, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. We talk about it more as in a posture, because at the end of the day, it's interesting because I can almost tell by looking at somebody what other physiological issues they have. Just because so many things are tied together. And a big one is when people have like really high shoulders, really, you know, they're in that guarded posture constantly. I almost can guarantee that a lot of them have digestive issues. And it's funny because it's usually true. Like it's not,
guys,
it's not
can you let us know?
Yeah,
Everybody write to us.
Yeah. It's amazing how many of those things are correlated and we don't even think about them. So because all of this happens subconsciously, that's the struggle of chronic pain, is you have to start to identify the things you're doing subconsciously to be able to actually address it. And that, I think, is the biggest step is, okay, what things am I doing to contribute to this? And I think it's not contribute in a way that you're making yourself be in pain. You're just contributing as you're having an experience in life that is shaping part of your pain unknowingly.
Yeah, and you're buying into stories that you don't even know that you're buying into, or you're buying into beliefs that you don't even know that you're buying into because it's become so normal. I think birth is a really good example. And, you know, I don't know if you know this, Victoria, or my beautiful listeners. I don't know if this is something you're into. I know some of you are, but like the idea of having an orgasmic birth, there are entire movements around just changing your response to the sensation and even the word contractions, and actually creating the experience of birth orgasmic. I haven't given birth, so I can't comment. But it seems it actually seems logical to me. I'm like, yeah, you know, contraction doesn't really make sense because you're actually dilating and you're becoming bigger, but like, I'm sure maybe there's another reason behind that I'm not aware of. But why not? If we think about like BDSM and sex, pain and pleasure are so related. So related. You can be in so much intense pain and in so much intense pleasure. And if that's true with your partner like spanking you, why can't it also be true on a bigger scale having birth? Why can't it be true with, I don't know, whatever your back is doing on a Tuesday? You know, it might not be easy, but it could be true.
So, because biologically, when you are in pain, you do release endorphins, which are your body's natural painkiller. And endorphins are what make us feel high if you get enough of them. So that's why a lot of these are intricately linked, because biologically you do release everything to make your body feel better. What's interesting though is part of the problem with chronic pain is that people use other interventions like medication, which actually inhibit your body's ability to naturally produce endorphins. So your body can't naturally produce these endorphins as well or as easily. And so you have to rely on chemically induced, at least temporarily. And there, again, talking with your doctor, working with professionals, you can change that, but it's a bit of a mindset because you have to know that when you get off those medications, there is going to be a reset in your nervous system. There is going to be a reset mentally, physically, everything that you're going to have to go through before your body can naturally start producing its own painkillers again.
Yeah, and I think that you're also touching on a really important thing, which differentiates the way we experience pain and pleasure, and the difference between pain when you're doing something kinky with your partner, or even having a baby, versus pain like I slipped over and now I have problems with my back. And it's consent. Like, pain feels like it's happening to us and we do not have a choice. And if we did have a choice, we would make it not happen. Depending on your views on the world, that's that. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. That's a very spiritual conversation that's probably best for a different podcast. But like, yeah, you have to like buy in, you have to consent, you have to be like, okay, I'm having sensation. I'm gonna take the steps I need to change how I respond to this pain, and I consent to having this pain here. I'm a part of having this pain. I'm taking control. I'm no longer a victim. I'm moving forward with my life.
And I think this is that people try and find control in a totally different way. They still want control, but they try and do it by, well, I'm not going to do activity X, Y, and Z. And I can't go out past 5 o'clock because then my migraines are too bad, and I can't do this. And they try and put control into the worst areas you can, which are not controlling your pain at all. It's actually just, and in the end, it's controlling your quality of life and making it worse is really what it's doing. But it seems like the only thing you can do at the time. So that's what you go for, right?
Yeah, totally. Whew. It's big stuff. It's big stuff. I want to tell a little story because I think it demonstrates what we're talking about here. I was getting a tattoo over a year or something ago, and I didn't know anything about getting the tattoo. I was getting it on my foot, and people had kind of said to me, oh yeah, that's really painful, but I didn't have any. I was like, I'm going to get the tattoo. I'm not even speaking to people about it. We're just going and we're doing it. I brought my friend, and at the beginning, I was like, I have decided that this tattoo, every single needle that goes into me is going to be like, it's giving me like strength and energy and power. Every single needle is like a little IV needle of power. And we sat there for like 6 hours, and I was just so relaxed. I didn't feel a single thing of like no pain at all. It tickled. It like tickled a little bit when he was in certain places. And I also didn't really think anything of it. And my friend is really wonderful, and she didn't ask me any questions. She was just chatting, and then she went away. Then I was by myself. Like, we didn't make a big deal out of me not having pain. And I think the tattooist, he was probably really happy. So he also like didn't say anything. And then when we finished, every single person at the tattoo studio came and was like, oh my God, how did you just do that? You did that so quick. It's really hard to have. Didn't you have, like, they made this big deal about me not having pain. And I was like, I thought they were joking with me because I didn't know that it was supposed, according to the story, to hurt so much.
Well, we see this in kids all the time. A kid falls down, they look at their parents go, oh, and they go, oh no, they're saying that this is something happened that's bad. I need to respond in a sad or upset way because clearly something's wrong. And that's how they learn, that's our earliest experiences of pain, are watching our parents. When our parents had pain, what did they do? Did they lay in bed and couldn't move? There's actually a really interesting study that they did with children, and they asked them to draw pain. And they did them with kids. I believe they were ages like 5 or 6 to like 11 or 12. So they were in the age of like, they could understand, but they weren't really good at expressing themselves yet. And they did the movie with these kids, and they had them draw pain. And it was interesting because there's essentially 2 ways that kids drew pain. And it was based off of their experience. So some kids drew pain as like fire or, lightning bolts or whatever. And then the other kids drew pain as an emotion, like sadness. And what's interesting about the study was that the kids that drew pain as an emotion had people in their lives that experienced chronic pain or surgery or cancer or something like that. So they had watched their parents, aunts, uncles, whoever, siblings go through pain as an emotion because they weren't physically feeling it themselves. They were watching somebody else. So their association with it was an emotional response versus these other kids who didn't have anybody in their life yet who had that. So they experienced pain as falling down and hitting and scraping your knee. And it's these lightning bolts and these, throbbing movements. It's not an emotion to them. And I thought that was very interesting because that sets the basis of sometimes our further pain experience.
Yeah. I wonder what we would all draw if we were to write pain. That would be really interesting. Like, yeah, but like, I wonder what we would have drawn when we were like 5 years old versus what we would draw now. Wouldn't that have been a fun experiment?
Because I think now most of us, if we drew pain, would draw it as like pills and the healthcare system and like.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, so Viktoria, if I'm listening to this podcast and I clicked on it because I experience pain, chronic pain, and you were to give me like 1 or 2 next steps, what do I do now? What would your recommendation be?
So the first step is always to ask yourself, do I believe that I could be free of this pain? And it is probably the most important question you can ask yourself. And I encourage you to ask yourself along your journey as well, because the answer is going to change. When I first experienced my pain, if I had asked myself that, I don't know if I would have said yes. I now am pain-free. And like now in my journey, I'm like, yeah, I can be pain-free. But at that time, when I was really deep into it, I think I would have said, no, like I'm going to be stuck with this. It might get better, but I'm going to be stuck with it. And the problem is, until we shift our idea that we can get better, how are we supposed to get better? There's so much self-sabotage that goes into this idea. If you don't believe you can do something, it's going to be really hard to ever do it. Whereas if you tell yourself, even if you don't fully believe it yet, just tell yourself you can get better. And better may be less frequency or less intensity or both. And it could be a week, it could be a month, it could be 3 years. It's a journey for everybody. But ask yourself that question first and really do a bit of a journaling exercise to ask yourself what that means. Do you think you can get better? And if no, which is okay, if you say no, that's okay. But ask yourself why. Why don't I believe I can get better? What is stopping me? And oftentimes you'll see in that there's this biological response. Well, I can't get better because I have this physical abnormality. I can't get better because I have this condition. I can't get better. And there's all these lists of really what you feel is a defining factor. But the reality is, what I've seen is that I've had clients who have like genetic conditions where if you looked at them, you would say that person has to be in pain, and they have zero pain. So it's not as simple to say, I have this condition and that's why I have pain, but it may be one of your beliefs. So identifying that is one of the first things you could do. After that, start to make a list of what makes you feel nervous with your pain, because these are going to be things that are your triggers to pain.
That's a great question.
Yeah. And it looks different for everybody. So it could be, again, like with low back, it's often picking up and twisting, like that lifting and twisting motion, which is funny because if we are unconsciously or subconsciously doing that without noticing, we don't have any pain. And I'd always tell clients, if I was to videotape you all day without you knowing, I guarantee you would do some of the movements you tell me you can't. And what's interesting about that is I had a client, she had some knee pain issues stuff going on. I asked her, are you able to kneel down? And she's like, well, and she's going to say no. And then she's like, oh, gun to my head. Yeah, I could kneel down. I thought that was really interesting because she would have said, no, I can't kneel down. But what she was actually saying is, it hurts me to kneel down. Can I kneel down is a different question. Physically, yes, I can. I just don't want to because it triggers pain. So going through this list of like, what do I believe is triggering for me? Where do I hesitate? Where am I nervous, anxious? What is that look like? Will start to give you a really good picture of what your beliefs are again. And then once you understand those beliefs, that's when you can start to make a difference. Because again, if you don't know what it is that's limiting you to getting better, and again, if my belief is I can't pick up laundry off the ground and turn because my back is weak and, incapable, at least I have a starting point of what I need to work on. Okay, well, I need to work on strengthening my back. And that's going to be a small piece to getting better, but the small things will add up. Sleep is the number one thing I start with clients, is getting better sleep. Because sleep is regenerative. Most people with chronic pain or chronic conditions struggle with sleep. And I find that it's once you explain the science of sleeping to them, they can make really tangible changes to their sleep to get a better sleep that will give them the energy and resolve to actually keep moving into their pain and their pain story with less hesitation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if sleep, if most of us got 50% better or more sleep, or even 20 or 30% better or more sleep than we are currently getting, I'm pretty sure that most of the world would resolve. Like, I know a lot of you beautiful listeners are here because of nervous system regulation, and I don't actually speak about this as much as I could. Maybe I could speak about it more, but sleep, like just sleep.
100%. And what's interesting is that, so there's a lot of reasons you don't get good sleep. And I often with my clients, I have like a little education I send them, which is pre-recorded, that explains what the circadian rhythm looks like, the things that affect your circadian rhythm. Like I really break down, because for me, in order for me to buy into a topic or an idea, I need to understand the science. I'm that type of person. I want to understand it.
I do the same thing. So I'm like, guys, this is your nervous system.
Yes. And the thing is, when you have nervous system dysregulation, of course, you're not going to sleep as well, because think about it. Sleeping is a very vulnerable time. It is a time where you are open to essentially any kind of attack from a very primal standpoint, right? So our body instinctually does not want to allow us to get into those deep REM sleeps that we really need to get into, because it needs to keep us into a light sleep. So if we are disturbed, we can wake up and protect ourselves quickly. So it is a lack of getting good sleep when it comes along with trauma and all this other stuff, even chronic pain, is a nervous system issue, because it's a sense of safety. So you're seeing a theme here with like the sense of safety really affecting a lot of our health issues.
Yeah. And that's where we land consistently and over again. It's not if you consciously think that you're safe, because I would argue that if you're listening to this podcast, you probably are safe, but you could be listening to this podcast right now and your body could be completely convinced that you are about to be pursued by a lion and a predator, and things are about to go really, 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 really wrong. And you guys know what I'm talking about. You have felt it in your body. It's the reason that you're tired. It's the reason that you're in pain. It's the reason that you're even in this world, because let's be honest, most of us got here because we felt that way. There was something that just felt, doesn't feel right. That's your body. That's your nervous system. Mm-hmm. This is amazing. So we have our journal prompts. You've given us homework to have some sleep. That's absolutely super, super helpful. Dear listener, before we wrap the end of this episode up, I want you to know that I see you. I know that you're ready to bounce back from difficulties in your life quickly and with more ease by having the tools to regulate your nervous system and find inner peace instead of inner conflict. I know you're ready to embrace life's challenges and stresses and feel confident to take on whatever comes your way, including anxiety or anger, to move through them without manipulating them, without having to spend eternity in uncertainty, sticky emotions, and physical discomfort. You are ready to celebrate the growth of yourself, your relationship, your finances, without experiencing shame or guilt when you're doing it quicker than those around you. Which is why I'm extending an invitation to you to book an expansion call, where we will dive even deeper on exactly what you need in your personal situation to make this a reality, to go from overwhelmed managing big emotions and perhaps going into anxiety or depression to overflowing abundance, ease, and certainty. You'll get free support around your unique situation, and we will also discuss whether or not working through my ease framework in a one-on-one capacity is the best fit for you right now on your journey of becoming more resilient and regulated. Use the link in the show notes to lock in your call ASAP. Viktoria, if I am sitting on the back of this podcast and I'm listening and I was interested in working with you, where would I go? What would I do?
So you can reach out to me on social media at vikkah. I have my link tree there as well for all my links to everything, as well as other podcasts and bookings and all that fun stuff, just more information. Or you can check me out on my website, which is www.viktoriahamma.com. And that's Viktoria spelled VIKTORIAHAMMA. So either place, I'm happy to respond. If you have questions, if you need more resources, like that's a big thing as well, is people just don't feel like they know where to turn. I am not going to be the be all end all for everybody. That is not my goal. I know I can't help everybody. There are people that are my people and they're going to do really well with me. But if I don't think you're going to be the right fit for me and I'm not going to be the right fit for you, I have lots of other people I can refer you to that can help you along your journey. There is help out there. You just need to sometimes believe.
Yeah, that's really beautiful and really, really true. And I will make sure that those links are in the show notes so everyone can click on them. And really, really important, don't forget, if you tend to lift your shoulders up to your ears and you also have IBS, or you lift your shoulders up to your ears and you don't have digestive problems or something, let us know, because that's a little experiment and we want to hear from you. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Viktoria.
Thank you. It was great.
A big and special thanks to Upturned for composing this magical piece of music and to GS Studios for mixing it. To find Upturned's other tracks or ask for your own special custom piece of music, go say hello using their contact details in the show notes.